Welcome to Lost in Revision. All of our content is public domain, literature, fairy tales, and folklore. We are here to celebrate the original stories, not just read the modern sanitized versions. We post short segments of stories daily and monthly full episodes where we read and discuss popular classics. Come and find us on Patreon to listen to the full chapters early and without interruption. Our goal is to at least break even to cover our expenses, so any support that you can offer to help us reach that goal helps keep this podcast going and you entertained. All of our music is by Nathan Hubble and is used with his permission. Thanks, and enjoy the show.
Chapter 11. Paul's Bad Luck.
Part 4.
At one time during the big fog, the mist began to leak through the cook's shanty roof. So Paul called out some of his men and set them to nailing on more shingles. When the fog finally cleared away, there was a great crash where the men had done their work, and they saw then what they had done. The thickness of the fog had confused them, and instead of nailing the shingles on the cook's shanty roof, as they thought they were doing, they had nailed them out onto the fog itself, which, of course, let the new roof collapse when its support began to disappear. Paul Bunyan finally figured out a way to get rid of the big fog. He hitched Babe up to a great plow, made a lot of ditches, and drained the fog right back into the river. The big fog was probably the cause of the immense mosquitoes that soon afterwards began to appear. They swarmed through the woods in ever-increasing numbers and became a real menace to the workmen in Paul's camp. One of the few mistakes which the great logger ever made was when he thought out a plan of fighting off the mosquitoes with bumblebees. He sent away for a lot of extra big bees and turned them loose, expecting them to get rid of the pests in no time at all. But instead of fighting them, the bees made friends with the mosquitoes. They became so friendly that they intermarried, and the young bee mosquitoes that resulted were worse than their parents, for they had a sting at both ends. Those youngsters were terrors, and they made life not only miserable, but dangerous for everyone in the woods. Paul had to put extra guards with pike poles, peaveys, and axes for weapons into the stables to fight the insects away from the animals when they succeeded in tearing the shakes off the roof so that they could get in. This new crop of gigantic insects was so large that there was not nearly enough for them to eat after they finished killing off all the wild animals in the woods nearby. As a result of their ferocious instincts, it was not long before they became so dangerous that a man was taking his life in his hands if he went out of doors. Paul finally managed to play a trick on them, though, that got rid of most of them. He sneaked a lot of men down into the fire hole under the big flapjack griddle, and then barricaded the place where they had come in. The swarm of bee mosquitoes settled down thick all over the griddle, smelling the men underneath, and tried their best with both stingers to bore their way to where the men were. Paul waited until the insects had their stingers wedged deeply into the steel. Then he and his men had an easy time killing them off with axes and clubs, as their weapons were rammed tightly into the griddle and they couldn't fight back. They nearly ruined the big griddle, though, and it later had to be turned over so that the other side could be used. The stingers had punctured the first side so full of big holes that the cook boys would have been in great danger of falling in as they skated around to grease the griddle. After these ferocious creatures had been subdued, Paul and his men heaved great sighs of relief, thinking that their bad luck was over and that they would soon be getting the big onion camp to running along on its expected schedule. Winter was at hand, and everyone set about putting things into the best of shape in hope of securing a record cut of logs during the months to come.
Thanks for joining us today. Check us out on Patreon. The Storytime level is only $3, and you can help us meet our small goal of breaking even and covering our expenses. Your support helps pay for all of the things that podcasting requires and helps keep this show alive and growing. If you can't afford to support us financially, go give us a good review, subscribe or follow, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to fact check us and offer suggestions to make our show better for you. You can also send us an email at lostinrevisionpodcast@gmail.com.
There's a lot more waiting for us all at the end of the road.